Mr. Woodruff, you've tested positive for HIV. Have you ever used intravenous drugs? Have you ever engaged in homosexual conduct?
Homo. You say homo? You made a mistake, because that ain't me.
Mr. Woodruff, we estimate you have 30 days left.
Let me be your ticket home.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Hey, welcome, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you and welcome back to another live session here with Price Support Services. My name is Ray Castillo. I'm founder and CEO, president of Price Support Services.
I'm Xavier Laporte, co-founder and director of operations for Price Support Services.
We have some great guests with us today in the panel, and I will let first Wesley go ahead and introduce yourself. Everybody knows you, but go ahead and introduce yourself, Wes.
I'm Wes Thompson. I am an HIV specialist in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been practicing medicine and taking care of HIV patients for 35 years as of next month.
Yay.
Awesome. And then we have Mr. Laurenzo. Laurenzo, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for allowing me to be a part. Hey, Wesley. Nice to see you again. My name is Laurenzo Surrell-Page. I am the EPI Peer Navigator, which EPI stands for Empowering Positive Youth. So I'm the peer navigator at RAIN, and I'm also a part of the mentor team there as well. So thank you all for allowing me to be a part.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. So we have a very interesting topic today, which is very near and dear to my heart, and I know it's very near and dear to Wesley, and I also know it's very near and dear to Laurenzo, because we all work in the healthcare industry, and it's HIV, AIDS, and PrEP. The clip that you saw before the live session is a movie called The Dallas Buyers Club, and it was based on the mid-1980s. A man in Texas, Ron Woodruff, was diagnosed with and at that time he thought he had 30 days to live. So as a way to kind of cope with what was going on, he found some treatment drugs that were in Mexico, and he started smuggling them into the U.S. To help other people as well as himself. Obviously, he made it a business, but it was very interesting to see how he kind of progressed with the drug. Have you, Laurenzo or Wes, seen the movie before?
Yes.
So it's a very interesting watch. It gives another perspective to the HIV, topic. But so let's just go ahead and get right to it. Wes, you have the floor. Kind of give us a little bit of a backdrop on HIV and its history.
Okay, this will take a few minutes, so I'll try to be brief, but this is something that I love to talk about. We in June 5th, 1981, there was an article in JAMA about 8 homosexuals with some very severe problems, mainly uncontrolled diarrhea and some unusual lesions. And very quickly, that by July, that was called gay bowel syndrome. By August, it was called GRID, gay-related immune deficiency syndrome, and that was in 1981. I'll jump forward. I know this movie was based in 1985. 1985 is when we finally had an antibody test that could tell you that you have HIV. We had no medications to treat it. Interestingly enough, everything that he tried in that movie, most of them were very real products that were being studied, but none of them were effective. Now, a little bit of history before I talk about the medications that did come out. We now have been able to go back and look at specimens that were saved for epidemiological reasons. Our first documented death in the United States was in a 16-year-old African-American hemophiliac in St. Louis who died in 1976. The preserved specimens of his organs showed HIV virions. Of course, at that time, he died from some unusual pneumonia that was rare. I can't remember if it was PCP or whether it was histo or something else. The earliest case in Europe was in 1971 in Oslo, Norway. We also have a case in 1961 in Haiti, and the earliest case in Kinshasa is 1951. And they have lots and lots of paraffin wax-based specimens that show HIV virions in many different things from 51 forward. But there was a flood in the building that stored those, and all of the paraffin slides before 51 were destroyed. So we don't know how far back it goes. However, if you look at the HIV that we can see from the 1961 and 1951 samples, and we look at our modern day HIV, if you think about it being a little bit in the 50s and 60s and the genetic drift makes it bigger, you can see that if you took that here and went farther out, you could get to a point where you can guesstimate when the virus jumped species, and we estimate it to be between 1887 and 1917. We can look at the HIV genetic code, and we see that it is two separate strains. One is the green the mangabey and the green rhesus monkey. Both of these were protein sources for that area of Africa, and at some point, those two simian viruses, which were harmless to humans separately, when they combined in patient 0, whenever that occurred, patient 0 being a human, those two viruses joined together and jumped species to a deadly virus. Now, it lived in the villages of Cameroon for decades upon decades, and these were small villages, 5,000, 10,000 people, maybe separated by 10 to 50 miles. So there wasn't a lot of transportation or interaction between them. But with the advent of the railroad that brought all of these villages down to Kinshasa, it became like the most productive center of Africa at that time. Then cars and gasoline followed, and it began to spread through Africa. And then with airplanes, it came to Haiti, and then from Haiti, it was then later identified in Europe and America. So that's how it spread. Now, having said that, that gives you kind of a how long we've been dealing with it. There was a drug that was created in the 1960s by a Japanese doctor at Mellon University, and it was called AZT. It was, interestingly enough, a thymidine analog that he was trying to treat cancer with. And it did kill the cancer, but it also killed the patients, and that was the 1960s. And it was put on the shelf for 20 years until a nurse practitioner in Research Triangle Park tried it by accident on a petri dish that was coated with HIV, and it temporarily stopped the virus from replicating and growing on the petri dish. That was our first clue. Interestingly enough, a trivia story about AZT, I don't know where scientists get these ideas, but AZT was found in herring semen, fish cum. Now, I would like to know what got somebody to go, oh, let's look and see what fish cum does to cancer. How do you come up with these things? Just amazing, the origins of where some of our chemicals come from. Well, AZT was not enough. Very quickly, we had 2 more drugs in that same class, and still wasn't the right combination. It was not until 1993 when a new class called the non-nucleosides, that we then had 3 drugs from 2 classes, and we saw the first undetectable viral loads. CD4s began to rise. The next year, and that drug was called Viramune at that time. Then the next year, a protease inhibitor came out that was Crixivan, and that was a true game changer. Not only between that and the Viramune, we saw all the skeletons of the Castro, as we called them, gain weight, come back to life. But it was a full-time job. It took, it was some pills with water, some pills on an empty stomach, some with food. Can't mix these two, got to separate these. And then you were taking anti-nausea and anti-diarrhea pills. 30, 40 pills a day was your full-time job. You didn't have time to work, really. And to look where we were, and now it's simply a pill a day to treat HIV and a pill a day to prevent HIV. It is nothing short of a miracle where we've come. That was from 87 to 2020. Do the math. It's not even half a century that we've gone from this death sentence to, a very controllable chronic condition.
And weren't they using at some point methotrexate to treat it?
Well, methotrexate is an immunomodulator. It downregulates your immune system. So they had hoped that it would downregulate your body's response to HIV. What it did was it inhibited your body's response to fighting off an infection and gave HIV room to really explode. They also tried hydroxyurea, which was another drug that even when I started practicing in the when we got effective treatment in the late 90s, we were already adding hydroxyurea to the medicines we had then, thinking that there might be a synergistic effect, and there really wasn't. It was a big mistake.
So, Lorenzo, we're going to come back to you in a minute, but I do want to continue, and you're more than welcome to jump in the discussion at any given time.
Feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, so Wes, let's talk about, the difference, right? This is all about education, and what a wonderful explanation of where this came from, because I'm learning as I go. But what is the difference between HIV and AIDS?
Okay. HIV is a virus that your body can potentially contract. And if that virus is left unchecked and untreated, 99% of everyone exposed to HIV will get to the point where their immune system is so weakened that opportunistic infections occur. And that becomes AIDS. Now, we used to say that if your CD4 dropped below a magic number of 200, you had AIDS. We no longer say that because we know people who've dropped below 200, and then you get them on medicine and they jump up to 700, 800, 900, which is a really healthy CD4. And it's really hard to say 20 years later, oh, you have AIDS. So we really now have modified that there's a series of AIDS defining diagnoses that we use.
And I'm sorry, Xavier. I want to make a real quick parenthesis here, because we want to ensure that our viewers and everybody that gets to see this video understands, right, the seriousness of what HIV and AIDS is. We don't want to discount that just because there are medications, right, out there that are, like you said, there's one that actually prevents you from getting in, there's one that treats it. And it's wonderful that we have that medication right now, but nevertheless, this is a serious virus and disease.
It is life-changing in the sense that there is still so much stigma around it. And I don't mean to be flippant about HIV, but if I were given the choice today, I had to choose a diagnosis between, say, diabetes and HIV, I would choose HIV. It is easier to treat and manage than diabetes. So that's how far we've come. Can you imagine if I could choose an illness, I would choose HIV over diabetes. I have to say that and let it sink in.
Yeah.
Now, certainly, and Laurenzo he can talk to this. He has so many clients that live with the stigma of HIV. That is probably the biggest piece, because diabetes, you didn't do anything to get diabetes. Well, yeah, you did, but that's another story. But there's the stigma of HIV implies choice of a bad decision, and that's the biggest challenge to living with HIV that I still see today in the 21st century.
And I want
to add.
Go ahead, Laurenzo.
Just to add to that, Wes, I absolutely 100% agree. Dealing with the stigma has been the biggest struggle with not just me at times, being someone who is living with HIV and is undetectable, but also with my clients and trying to help them get through that. And imagine, not having that family support system and then trying to deal with all that on your own. It is not the easiest thing, which is one of the reasons why I love my job and love that I get to kind of hold their hand through the process and help them navigate through kind of that weird, uncomfortable moment for not just them, but sometimes family members need education and just kind of that reassurance that their child is going to be okay, or that family member as well. So that stigma does play a big piece, and it's something that kind of hits me every so often, because I kind of get caught up in like, why, what can I do to help you get through this? And sometimes just being there, just for them to kind of fall back on at any given moment is the best thing you can do. So I definitely agree with that 100%.
Awesome. And I want to go back real quick. And Wes, you can definitely explain this I'm going to explain it like we say in rice and beans. But when Wes talks about numbers, we're talking about CD4 count and we're talking about viral load, which are the two numbers that we look at when we talk about HIV. CD4 is a very specific type of white blood cell or a defender of our body, which is responsible for immune response. And so think of it this way: the virus, the HIV virus, and this is the way I explain it to my patients, is like a little gremlin. For those of you who are old enough to remember the gremlins, it enters your body and it starts replicating, it starts copying itself, and that's what your viral load is about. It starts copying itself, and then you say that's your viral load, and then as it starts replicating, it starts killing your CD4 cells, and that's what you want to stop with the medication. And Wes, you can explain it obviously more eloquently than I can.
Yeah, and how does the medication, right, impact the not only the stop of reproduction of the virus, but also to transmit it to someone else?
Okay, let me try to. This is a very long, complicated answer. So let me start by saying that the HIV virion, which is what we call that, or viron. Some people say virion, some people say viron. It has to touch the surface of the CD4, and then a portal is opened up, a gateway between those two surfaces once they touch, and HIV squirts its genetic material inside the CD4. And we have something inside the CD4 that's called a messenger genetic stuff called messenger RNA. It immediately recognizes, oh, you're a single strand. Well, we're a double-stranded species, so it lays down on there and becomes a double strand, and that is the transcription that occurs. And then it moves that into our nucleus, and it becomes a permanent part of our CD4 DNA. That's why we can never get rid of HIV except in some very rare, destroy all the CD4s on our bone marrow, and then you can do that. And it's only happened to two people that have survived, and that's the Berlin patient and the London patient. Well, from the time that CD4 touches the surface and that genetic material gets inside, goes through our nucleus. When it comes out the other side of our nucleus, it's a bunch of little proteins that form together, and they move towards the surface of the CD4 and they bud off just like yeast do. And each budding is a new HIV virion. Now, HIV is really fast. That one HIV virion can make 7 million copies of itself before the original one dies off. So what happens is, left unchecked, the CD4 will completely ravage left unchecked, HIV will completely ravage the CD4 so that the entire surface is eventually eroded and there's nothing left of it. It's basically like a hollowed out, shrunken, shriveled up cell because it has nothing left for HIV to use. So then that CD4 dies. That's why we know HIV is winning, not just because the viral load is going up, because the CD4 is also going down. So when you give the medicine, it stops that replication process all along the pathway. Right when that messenger RNA touches, right when it gets inside the nucleus, that's called the integrase inhibitors. The proteins on the other side, that's the protease inhibitor. So they work all along that cycle to stop it. And HIV is so fast in its replication ability that's why one drug and two drugs in the same class never worked. And when we finally got these multiple classes, we finally had a way for it to work. Now, a little quick rhyme for your patients to remember, because they get confused, kind of deer in the headlights when you talk about all these fancy numbers. And we medical people aren't that smart. We just memorize rhymes. So if you teach your patients more CD4, low viral load, if you can remember to say those two little phrases, you'll remember where you want to be. More CD4, low viral load.
Perfect. Awesome. So so let's go ahead and talk about transmission, right? Because it's important and what we're trying to do, right, is educate again the people that are viewing us, right? And it's I always take the stance of I rather tell people how to protect themselves and what not to do than assume that today's 2020 and people should know. So why don't we talk about the transmission and how that can happen?
Okay. There's a lot of misinformation or old, outdated information on the internet. And Here is the way it is. If I have HIV right now and I am not on medicine and I have a high viral load or detectable viral load, you still cannot get HIV from my tears, snot, spit, sweat, or piss. There is no HIV concern in those fluids. There is a concern with semen, rectal secretion, vaginal secretion, breast milk, and blood. Those are your 5 fluids that you want to watch out for. Now, you get yourself onto HIV medicine and you've been undetectable. The guidelines say for 6 months. Once you've been undetectable for 6 months, those 5 fluids are now undetectable, and undetectable is untransmittable. Now, to take that a step further, because our viral load tests now are so sensitive, we go less than 20, but sometimes you'll see one that says 21 or 26, and maybe you did have a little blip, or maybe it was reading artifact. The guidelines are specific that they consider anything less than 200 untransmittable. So if a patient calls you, Laurenzo, and they have 110, and they go, oh my God, I'm detectable, what do I do? Well, first reassure them that could be test error. And number 2, the guidelines say less than 200, you're still okay. So that's something to remember.
So Laurenzo, I'm going to come to you now because I want to hear from your side. And when it comes to educating people, you deal with this every single day. When you're talking to people about transmission, how do you address it with them, and what is their reaction? And if you can just kind of talk a little bit to that.
I think one of the biggest things for me is pretty much really building that organic relationship with them. So when you first meet me, depending on how it is, I'm not going to dive into this whole, what are you doing sexually? You know, what are your sex practices, things like that. I mean, I'm human, so I understand. I'm a peer as well, so I'm not here to beat anybody over the head about anything. I'm also still a young adult to an extent, so I understand how it can be. But I think very much so just basic education around just safe practices when it comes to sex is the best thing. And just making sure that we don't, it's not one of those things. I have clients who are involved in the porn industry, have clients who are involved in sex work and different things. And it's not my job to sit there and judge them based on how they choose to live or whatever the case may be. And at the end of the day, I'm just a friend to hold your hand through the process. So who am I to sit here and pass any judgment? I think making sure they have the necessary resources to, whether that's, hey, let me connect with Wes. If I'm going to be that middleman, let me call Wes. If this client is going out of town this weekend and they know, you know, they might have gotten into or had an encounter with somebody that was questionable to them, well, let me reach out to see if we can get you tested. You know, and I think once you build that bond with clients, they're very much more comfortable with coming to you and saying, look, this is what happened this weekend. This is what I did. And I think that is the most difficult thing at times. We want to build that relationship with them. And then at times it takes the time to do that. You know, it's not going to be that kind of microwavable relationship. It might take a few months. You know, I might have to build a relationship with their provider, as well as their mom and some other family members as well. So the education is a very much so continuation. It's not just a one-time thing. It's, hey, you know, how are you doing? That follow-up check-in on a, you know, weekly basis, just to ensure that everything is going well. And it's a normal conversation. I think sometimes I feel like we think that conversations around sex is so difficult and taboo. And I purely understand. I grew up in a religious home where sex was very much so taboo. We didn't talk about it. We were not supposed to get married. We were not supposed to have sex until marriage. So I get that. So it's very much so me or whoever is doing that in that position to take the time to normalize it and make them feel comfortable and understand that, hey, I'm not here to pass any judgment. I'm here just to make sure you're doing your thing safely and to make sure that you're taken care of at the end of the day.
And I think that's very important. And I think that's one thing I've always admired about Wes's practice is the non-judgment. You walk in there and you know, he's like, okay, you have sex. Good for you. We all do. And it's just a matter of, okay, what are we going to do?
More fun than that. I promise you it's more fun than that one comment.
Well, I'm not gonna throw him under the bus here, but it's, it's a situation of the comfort level, right? That Wes feels with all of his patients, where it's an environment where it's a judge-free zone, where you can walk in and you can talk about absolutely anything and know that, and be absolutely 100% reassured that there isn't going to be a mean look or a turn of the head or a shake. It's going to be like, okay, how can we move forward? And I think that's absolutely and extremely important to someone who's living with HIV.
Mm-hmm.
So Laurenzo, tell us from your experience. You disclosed to us, and we appreciate that you live yourself with HIV and you're currently undetectable.
Yes.
What was it like for you when you got diagnosed, and how are things now?
So when I was diagnosed September 15th, 2015, this was in Houston, Texas. And that moment was very much so interesting to me. I think in the back of my head, I kind of knew that there was a possibility, but it was something that I wasn't ready to deal with fully. And I'm very transparent. So I actually wasn't going to get tested. I was going to get treated for my first STI. And I was like, oh my God, all over the place about that. Because they were doing a culture for this particular STI, and I was not having it. So that I had gotten to a clinic, and the people were very nice and caring and understanding. And I promise you, I remember the guy probably saw like the fear on my face. I'm like, I know what I have. I don't need this culture thing that everybody's trying to give. Just treat me before they let me go. And the lady had tested me for. She was like, let's just test you for other things as well. And I was like, I'm here. Why not? And it was a very, I want to say like numb moment, because it's like in the back of my head, I hadn't been tested for a moment of time. So I was preparing myself in advance to like, look, you got to be prepared for the worst. You don't know what's going to happen. This is, even though I wanted to just go in there and get treated and leave. But when the doctor did come back with, she kind of made it seem like she had to, question my test to go get a second opinion, which now I know, working in the field, she just had to go grab somebody to have that conversation with me. It was a very numbing experience. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, okay, and I can't say this for everybody else, knowing the clients that I've worked with, they haven't had that same experience. Where it was just like, hey, I personally know that now that I have it, I have to use this to help other people. And that's not everybody's mindset. I do understand kind of that emotional process that comes along with it. And for me, it kind of happened like in the middle of probably me dealing with my diagnosis. It didn't really hit hard until I had to understand with, dealing with disclosing to people and the stigma around it, and people not understanding, having to go to my adoptive mother and share that experience that, hey, I'm now living with HIV. And on top of that, she sees that I'm also a gay male. So imagine how that goes in a Baptist home. So that process was a little bit different for me. It kind of went backwards. I think I kind of had the more emotional experience somewhere down the line towards the middle of my diagnosis. Or later on during my diagnosis, for sure. And for clients, it's not the same. I can definitely say a few may have had that experience, but for most, it's not the same. I know of clients who have dealt with, their status, and they had to do it on their own because their parents are refusing to help them. They're refusing to provide shelter due to the lack of understanding around HIV for themselves. And it can be a very lonely place if you don't have kind of that support network of people to really help you for that time.
Right. Laurenzo, and I like to, since you're talking about it, I want to kind of bring up the, can you tell us a little bit about, your work, your type of work, what you do for people, right? So that they can know that there are places out there that can assist, right? That they shouldn't really be afraid or fearful of going for help. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what your organization does, and what you're there for?
So RAIN, we are a case management organization, and we work with those living with HIV and those who are not living with HIV. So just a few of the programs, and I'm going to try to get them all. We do offer case management services. We have adult case management, as well as we have a PrEP case manager. We also have an EIS, early intervention services, and that is for those clients who may fall out of care. We have a program for them where we have peers working in that position to kind of go out and get them back into care and work with them to kind of navigate through whatever barriers that might stop them from being fully engaged in care. We also have bilingual services. We have mentorship program, which kind of falls under the program that I'm in, which I'll give you a little bit more about. But we also have, we do assist when it comes to our clients, making sure they're insured. So coverage when it comes to that, as well as making sure we link them to whatever providers that they might need at the time. When it comes to the EPI program, Empowering Positive Youth, I work with young adults from ages youngest so far as 15 to their 25th birthday and help them navigate through the healthcare system while kind of empowering them to advocate for themselves. So there's a lot of like life skills and different things that go into that, but we're also doing this from a holistic point of view. So we understand that, once clients, their medication and they stay on it and stick to it, that they can become undetectable and kind of go about their lives normally without any issue. A lot of things that we do forget are those barriers that kind of stop the clients from fully engaging into care or taking their medication. So where I come into play, or where the EPI program comes into play, is making sure we work with those clients really closely, whether that be family issues, whether that be stability in some way, shape, or form, housing. We try to do whatever is necessary to help eliminate those barriers while kind of giving them that power to have control over their lives and kind of take back that control. Also, we do work with clients to really have a voice in the community. I think I've been in this position a little under 4 years, and I've kind of seen an area where clients, youth in particular, are asked to come and speak and be a part of these boards and different groups and things as such, and they don't have the education to kind of help them get through that. So we do make sure we work with clients when it comes to mentorship to kind of help them understand what their voice looks like and how do they go into these spaces and advocate for not just themselves, but for everybody, living with HIV, and not just being another number or another youth in the room. So we do have that mentorship component as well.
What is your, again, we want to make sure that we put this out there. Are there any costs or associated with what you guys offer to the public?
No. Our services are free to the community, and even if you stop by and you have a question, we are always welcome to just help and kind of figure out where to send you or how to get you connected to whatever you might need. So our services are free of charge, of course. And even when it comes to our PrEP program, we work with our clients to ensure that they can have access to that for free as well. So we'll make sure we work with clients through those questions when it comes to pricing and different things. I would say if a client does have a question around something like that in relation to insurance, to be sure to reach out to us. Even when it comes to PrEP or getting tested, we do offer free HIV testing at RAIN, and in the event that, clients need help with that full panel testing, we do make sure we can refer them to other clinics as well.
Okay. So, Wes, back to you. I know that the inside the body, if not treated correctly, the HIV virus can wreak havoc. I know outside of the body, the virus is not so strong as it is inside the body. So, can you explain to us a little bit about, we already talked about the 5 bodily fluids that can transmit the virus for a person who's not undetectable. But we also see it a lot in our substance use population when it comes to needle sharing. So can you kind of explain to us a little bit about, to kind of educate everyone as to this cannot necessarily, they cannot necessarily get HIV from passing their hand over a bloody 2-day-old countertop?
That's a great question, Xavier. First off, as soon as the blood or semen or rectal secretion or vaginal secretion dries, HIV is dead. It's a very fragile virus and it ruptures. However, in those same fluids, if there is hepatitis B or hepatitis C, that dried blood, semen, whatever, 30 days later, if I take some spit and get it, bring it back to wet, the virus is still active. So it's nice to know that it's a very fragile virus and that once it's dried, dead is dead for HIV. I still recommend you clean it up appropriately in case there are other viruses or bacteria that could be alive or dormant in that dried spot. One thing I wanted to add when you were asking about HIV/AIDS, and I thought about it after Laurenzo started talking, one of the misconceptions that's out there, and it's still misleading, is that if I pick up HIV, I'm going to have AIDS one day. And that is incorrect. You can live to 70, 80, 90, whatever the good Lord plans for you, as long as you take your medicines and adhere to a healthier lifestyle, and you'll never hear the word AIDS. Now, not taking your medicines can certainly lead to AIDS, and not starting them at all can lead to AIDS. Taking them intermittently and stopping them on the weekends that you want to party can lead to AIDS. And we have regimens now that play nicely with crystal, crack, coke, alcohol, whatever your substance use disorder is, we have HIV medicines that you don't have to fear and stop because you're going to relapse or because you've decided to party. I'm not saying that I'm pro partying, but as Laurenzo's pointed out, we're human, we're sexual creatures, and we all like to let go sometimes, and some of us use some more challenging ways to do that. So.
Yeah. So by what you said, Wes, we can assume that the problem in needle sharing is that the blood inside that the shaft of that needle never dries because it doesn't come into contact with air. So that's where the virus continues to live. And then when you share the needle and you inject, that's when the transmission comes into play.
That is correct. And we still want to remember that U equal U applies in this same situation. We don't have a lot of data to say, is it the same to the same extent as HIV, but we postulate, as sexual transmission is. Sexual transmission, we know U equals U. With needle sharing, we're pretty certain, but we're postulating right now. We don't have enough data to say 100%. So I strongly encourage people to avoid needle sharing, or if you're needle sharing, you need to do hyper cleaning, heat, Clorox water, what most people who, are in that, they know what to do, before they get too altered.
Definitely.
I do want to bring us to, just thinking from the outside of the box and what people, right? Okay, so Wes, we have people, and Laurenzo, you can speak to this as well. Some people who are still thinking, right? Should I get on PrEP medication? I am not HIV positive, right? I think I'm safe. I'm having sex using condoms, but I'm having multiple relationships. What is your take or recommendation for people who are actively sexual out there, or more than that? When do you recommend that a person should get in PrEP if they're HIV negative still?
And I think you were asking that to me, not Laurenzo. Is that right? Or were you asking both of us?
Well, to both of you.
I'll let you start off, Wes. You definitely can start off.
All right. Well, first off, my simplest way to answer that is, Ray, do you have car insurance?
Absolutely.
Is that because you plan to wreck?
Absolutely not.
Okay, same thing with PrEP. I don't plan for the condom to break. I don't plan for a condomless episode. I don't plan for one too many shots of tequila because Xavier was trying to get me drunk. These things, happen. So PrEP is your insurance for an accident.
Perfect. Thank you.
So
Laurenzo,
if you're breathing, you should consider PrEP. And if you're not sexually active, I'm testing you twice because I don't know that I believe you.
That was beautifully said, Wes. Beautifully said.
Laurenzo, on your point of view, right, when you're talking to people, and I want to assume, maybe I'm wrong, but you're already talking to people who probably perhaps have been already diagnosed. Maybe that's your client.
Yeah. So in RAIN, we all share hats, especially when it comes to us as a team in QLAD and our program staff. It's not just, I'm stuck to doing strictly my job. There's going to be times where I have to go and possibly test somebody or possibly, help someone understand or have that conversation about PrEP with someone. So it's not just personally for me, just epi or just the program that I'm dealing with, for sure. So I would say, to answer your question, when it comes to people wanting to or having that question about, do I take PrEP or do I not, or why not? There's nothing wrong with that extra coverage, as Wes said. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Whether you're dealing with 3 people at a time or more than that, or just one, because that person could be dealing with multiple people as well. And I think sometimes we easily forget that. We're just caught up in that moment of just us or self, that interaction with that one person. So I would never say no, to somebody getting on PrEP, but I do understand people's reservations when it comes to it. And that's why we definitely have our PrEP case manager, PrEP navigator at RAIN to kind of help you through that conversation. Because we know some providers don't want to offer that. Everybody's not our great Wesley Thompson. When it comes to PrEP, they're dealing with that. Everybody doesn't have his style and grace and finesse. So you definitely, some clients we've had, hey, I want to go and talk to my provider about possibly getting on PrEP. What do I need to say, or what do I need to do, or what education I need to have when I go to present this to them? And we've had cases where some providers are not willing to put their clients or to offer PrEP to clients. They refuse to. So it is our job to really help them, to empower them, not only empower them, but make sure we are offering the right avenues or providers, giving them that option of providers to go to who are giving that are offering PrEP. Excuse me.
And to all of our viewers, PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. So it is a medication that you take on a daily basis to prevent you from contracting HIV. Now, Wes, the question I get, and I don't know if this happens to you, and Laurenzo, I don't know if this happens to you, but when I'm doing my HIV orientation at work, the question when I talk about PrEP is, they told me that is just they're giving you the virus so you won't get it. Now, Wes, please, because if I get on this boat, I'll never get off. So please.
Well, it is interesting. People, it is interesting what people will come up with. PrEP is a combination of 2 medications that stop HIV in the replication cycle at the transcription phase that I was talking about, right after HIV touches the CD4. So, people have asked me, how does it work? Well, it works the same way post-exposure does, which is 3-drug therapy. And since we started using post-exposure in 1995, no one has seroconverted to HIV positive who has started post-exposure within 3 days. what we learned was that when HIV first gets to your rectal mucosa or your vaginal mucosa, it stays there for about 3 days, causing a macrophage or an inflammatory response, building up steam, infecting macrophages, and then moving into the bloodstream. So that's why if we can get you on drugs before 72 hours, then HIV never makes it into our bloodstream and it effectively dies in the rectum or the vagina. And you'll notice I left the mouth out because oral sex is basically a zero risk. And I'm not giving people license, but really HIV is not a risk, even with those that are not on PrEP. Now, certainly I've seen syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, genital warts, herpes. I've seen everything in people's mouths. Matter of fact, I've seen too many things in people's mouths, to be honest, but that's a whole other story. It is COVID and you got to watch a lot of strange things when you're at home. So PrEP that's the way PrEP works. You take PrEP for 7 days and you have now built up enough medication in your rectal mucosa and vaginal mucosa that HIV never gets past that mucosal layer and into your bloodstream. It was building on the foundation of post-exposure, known as PEP, that led us to start the trials in 2007, known as the Partners and IPREX studies, that led us in 2012 to approve PrEP, pre-exposure. And we now have we have 2 PrEPs right now: Truvada, which is approved for everyone; Descovy, which is currently only approved for men and trans women. It is currently being studied in assigned female at birth patients right now, and once that is completed, then Descovy will be approved for that. There is also an injectable PrEP that should be out next year that will be a shot once a month or possibly every 2 months that is 69% more effective than oral PrEP.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And the reason it is so effective is people think they don't forget doses, but they do.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit to the side effects, right? Because people are, and let's talk about the misconceptions and what truly happened, because a lot of people feel that, well, that kills people. Yes, it helps you one way, but it kills your liver, it kills your kidneys. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay, I've been prescribing these medications, the current modern day 3-drug therapy. I've been prescribing that since 1995. And I've treated thousands of patients. Now that's 25 years. I started in 85, but these medicines since 95 for our current combination, some of the older ones plus some of the newer ones. And as of yet, I've had 0 patients experience liver failure or kidney failure or die or require a transplant or require hospitalization from any of these medicines. Now, having said that, how many people in America last year went to the hospital and died from an overdose of a drug known as Tylenol? 179 Americans died from Tylenol. Do you know how many died from alcohol overdose?
Oh, wow.
I can continue to list medications. We have plenty of things that are killing us. It's not our HIV medicines. I think that's more just stigma and denialism. If I don't take it, I can plausibly deny that I've got the HIV.
Right. And self-disclosure, I've been on PrEP for almost 3 years now. Started with Truvada, moved to Descovy. I have not had a single side effect from it.
Now, okay, what about speaking in terms of people that have different types of diagnoses, such as heart disease or diabetes, or they're living with different diagnoses? Wes, is it safe for them to be on this medication as well, or is it does it do anything else?
Yes, there are some drug interactions with some of our combinations. Some of the most recent ones that have come out, there are basically no drug interactions. I do want to be really clear because I'm sure many people have seen the Truvada lawsuits going on, or the attempts to have lawsuits. They're on Facebook, they're on everywhere. You see the ads, or they were. That really wasn't a lawsuit. They were trying to find people that had had problems so they could do a class action suit. This was actually triggered by the owner of AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And I won't get into the politics of why he was anti-PrEP, but yes, there are 2 or 3 per 100,000 prescriptions where a patient will have an alteration to their kidney function or an alteration to their liver function or an alteration to their bone mineral density, which are all reversible upon stopping the medication. That is why we encourage people to come every 3 months for labs.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And we're almost at the end, but I do want to, because I want to, these are the type of questions that sometimes we deal with in the mental health, right? But we're not.
May I add, and I just, because something about, may I add just a little bit what Wesley
Yes.
said? Wesley,
Yes.
please feel free to chime in. I think around the question about like side effects and, different things when it comes to taking medication, all I could think about was like the population or the population that HIV affects when it comes to just me being a Black gay male. I can understand like the reservations, especially around another person of color, having questions around like things like that, side effects and things because of systemic oppression, as well as different experiments, Tuskegee experiments, things that went on in the past. Like there's like a history of things that have happened and kind of been passed down from generation to generation, whether that's been stories from families, how they've understand it. So I completely understand a person's reservation around not taking any kind of drug or, for any, reason. So that kind of stuck out to me, and excuse me if I worded it wrong, but I couldn't like let us move forward without like addressing that.
No, you're absolutely right, Laurenzo. You're absolutely right. The Black community has had a terrible history of being used in the Tuskegee experiment in a very, very horrible way. So it definitely it's true what you say in terms of our sensibility to be able to explain things and to be able to kind of calm their worries and be able to sit down and explain. If you're not willing to have the patience to sit with someone and really go through the emotions with them of explaining and answering their questions, then there's no point in doing
exactly. And I think Wes, you do a great job of that, not just with me being a patient of yours, but with a lot of other clients I've seen. So I do appreciate you taking that time and being able to work with clients through those moments where it's like confusion or when the family doesn't even understand. I've sat in rooms with Wesley, with moms and dads, where he's explaining everything from top to bottom, reassuring them for sure that everything's going to be good. So
thank you. So we are about to end the session, but I did want to two things that I want to kind of ask you guys both. Wes, for you, in terms of does this medication for HIV prevent you against any other STIs?
No, only HIV.
Thank you. And I say that because we deal, like I started to say, we deal with the mental health aspect. That's what we do. But sometimes people think that just because I'm on PrEP, I'm good. I don't need to be worried about having unprotected sex. I am okay. They worry that the worst thing could happen is get HIV, and therefore they're on PrEP, so they don't have to worry about anything.
Until they're in clinic for that STI, right?
And these are the moments that I wish I spoke sign language. PrEP, it's not NOT, a substitute for condom use.
Absolutely.
Condom use is always, 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 always encouraged, and it's always, always, always needed.
Multiple partners anyway. I mean, even with your single partner, but multiple partners more than that. So the last thing for tonight, guys. We deal, again, mental health, right? So we're always about protecting the confidentiality of our clients' rights, right? Patients. So are there any laws in North Carolina, right, or what you guys in your type of work that protect the confidentiality and human rights of people living with HIV?
If I were to disclose it as a healthcare person without the patient's permission, yes. But if, for example, Laurenzo broke up with his, say, boyfriend and disclosed his boyfriend's status to someone else, that there is no law against that. Now, there are some new laws that are control measures that came about January 2017 through the work of NCAN, North Carolina AIDS Action Network, that removed the requirement that if you are undetectable, you are no longer required to use condoms in the state of North Carolina. Before that, if you were HIV positive, you were forever had to use condoms, even with your mutually monogamous spouse. And you also had to disclose your status. Now, I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree with this, but the control measures say that you equals you, you're not required to disclose your status. It's encouraged that you disclose your status to a sex partner, but it's not required, and it's not against the law to omit that data. And that's out there, and I'm going to just put it out there for people. They can do with it what they want.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Laurenzo, from your point of view, dealing with people, right? Let's just say a client just comes in, you're helping them. They say they're in a relationship with another partner, and, they test positive. Here you are dealing with that client or patient. What do you do? What do you suggest to them to do?
In all honesty, I'm going to listen and let whatever emotion flows out come, and try to work through that. I think sometimes we're very much, you're positive. Let's get you to this place or get you to that place. But you got to give the client time to feel whatever they're going to feel at that time. And it might, I'm not going to even lie to you, that first day might not be one of those days where I'm like, oh, I'm sending you straight to Wesley and we're doing this, this, and that. And we've had moments, and Wesley can attest to it, where we have had clients come in and test positive, and we've had them there within an hour of them being in the office and having them right at Wesley's clinic as well. So I'm not of that nature where I have to sit here and do this thing where, let me remind you of this. I don't mind that, but I want it to happen organically, and I don't want to beat the client over the head with anything. So whatever questions come out, I want to make sure I'm sensitive to that and to be able to listen. And after that, we'll kind of go down of, what providers we have, some education around HIV, sex safe, best safe sex practices, and just kind of work our way down the list. I'm personally not always in a rush to, to run the client straight to the clinic right at that time. I do want to take the time to make sure I understand what they're dealing with outside of that, because then it'll help me know how I can fully help them.
Absolutely. I definitely agree and appreciate that, because, people have, and this is what we, in therapy, we understand that, my crisis is not your crisis. And we have, as therapists, we have to understand that everyone processes differently and in their own time. We're just there to facilitate that process for them, right? And help them through that. But I do want to say before we end this, to anyone out there listening to us, listening to this session, if you've not been tested, please reach out to us, reach out to Rain, reach out to Wesley and his practice, get tested. It's important to know your status. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't really know what's your status and what to do, because it's available out there. But also from a perspective of mental health, anyone needs therapy or processing, right? This is what PSS is here for.
And I also want to say to our Latino community, our Black community, please get tested, please. It takes 15 minutes to do a rapid test. No one needs to know. No one is going to disclose your information. No one is going to say, is going to judge. Please, our Black community, our Latino community, there is a disproportionate amount of African Americans and Latinos that are living currently with HIV and do not know they have it. Please get tested. Even if it's every 6 months, if it's with your yearly physical, go out, get tested. Testing is absolutely free. $0, nada, nothing. It doesn't cost only 15 to 20 minutes of your time to go get a finger prick and know if you are in fact reactive or not. So please, please, please get tested. And I also want to say, I want to invite both of you, Wes and Laurenzo. This topic can go on for hours and hours, but we still have the part of stigma and how to deal with that. So we're going to bring this topic back specifically to talk about stigma and how we deal with stigma with HIV. To all of our viewers, please stay safe. Use condoms. Go to see Wesley. Call Laurenzo at RAIN. Call us for mental health services. Call C.W. Williams. And we are always here for you. Whatever you need, whatever, it doesn't matter, just reach out.
Yep. And we want to thank you, Laurenzo, for taking some time today of your day, right? Saturdays, I know usually, I don't know if you work on the weekends, but Saturdays usually is a resting day. But thank you for being with us. Thank you, Rain, right, as a partner, and allowing you to come on board and talk about this that is so important. Wes, I thank you. I mean, you're always here and available for us. So
you are our resident PA officially.
Absolutely, and we appreciate you very much. Thank you both for being here. Everybody that's watching this, thank you so much. Thank you for coming out. And we'll see you guys next time.
Lorenzo and Wesley, stay 2 minutes after. It's gonna go black, but stay. Thank you guys. Love you. Bye. We're nothing without you. Remember that.